Hi everyone, this is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and we are going live, and I've got Robert Stanley with me here, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the alien agenda, as he calls it, and we're going to be referring to Wes Penray's work, and we'll explain more about that once we get going here. So the first thing I'm going to do is put the banner ad on to identify the show. So just bear with me while we just do that for a moment. And that also allows me to check and ask everyone how the sound is so that we can get a sound check before we get going. So if you could just type in and let me know just in the chat. I know we already have some people in there, so. Okay, yes, the word is coming through that yes, we are loud and clear, and thank you very much, everyone. So, again, here's Robert Stanley, and we're going to, actually, what I'm going to do is read I guess a short bio here, and he is I believe he's the editor of what's called Unicus magazine, as well as he has a radio show by the same name. And just looking closely at his bio here, he's traveled to 60 countries during his pursuit of modern and ancient mysteries. And actually, I should put you on the screen so people can see you. Say hello, Robert.
Hi.
Okay, and I think we've got you on the screen there. So, one second. Okay, so you've done a lot of traveling. Your pursuit of ancient and modern mysteries. It looks like you've written some books and you've researched controversial subjects. Your investigations have been featured on television, radio, print, and the internet. Born in 1959 and a native of LA, California, grew up in Malibu. I'm surprised I never ran into you. I'm in this area. Okay, and but you moved in 2008 to southern New England, and then you went to Asia. So are you actually in Asia now?
Yes, I'm in Hong Kong as we speak.
Oh, all right. So I went to Hong Kong, actually spoke in Hong Kong. It was a wild, exciting adventure about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Enjoys surfing, hiking, motorbiking, tennis, photography, composing music, formerly a corporate journalist for Honda Research and Development in Torrance. You're employed as the corporate editor for an international company based in Hong Kong. Author of Close Encounters on Capitol Hill and Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. And although I haven't read your books, I'd love to do so. And I can say that I did hear a radio show with you where you do discuss some of those, as you say, covert encounters in Washington, D.C. And I think what's interesting about all of that is, you know, Bob Dean talking about the Anunnaki walking the halls of the Pentagon.
Right.
I heard that quote.
Yes.
And just before the show, we were just talking a bit about Bob Dean. I understand you're a good friend of his as well. So, and we wish him well,
Yes.
just in case everyone's wondering, because they always are. I am in touch with Marcia Schaefer, his wife. And as far as I know, Bob has, he's getting weaker. He's very elderly at this point, but he's still okay. And so that's the update on Bob. And of course, we always invite him on the show, but at this time, Marcia prefers that he doesn't try to do anything that will tax his energy and strength. So that's kind of where that's at. But to get back to Robert Stanley, Robert, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you here. I'd love to hear your version of your background, because I have to say your bio is kind of sketchy.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
very general.
Yeah, well, as you said, I'm a native of Los Angeles, but I've traveled around a lot, and obviously here in Hong Kong right now. But Malibu is important to me because that's where I started having close encounters back in the 80s through the 90s. And that's what really motivated me as a young man to investigate these matters and try to comprehend them. And ultimately, I started reporting on them professionally when I became editor of Unicus magazine. And it's just evolved from there to this point. I mean, I really thought, at times, I really thought I was just done. And I'm obviously not, otherwise we wouldn't be speaking. And I wouldn't be writing, I certainly wouldn't have written 2 books about the covert history of UFOs and extraterrestrials in Washington, D.C. In fact, that's one of the last things I did with Bob is I interviewed him for my first book, Close Encounters on Capitol Hill. Specifically because of what you said, what he had said about human-looking extraterrestrials being the ones that the NATO and the Pentagon felt the most threatened by, because they could just infiltrate anywhere within our infrastructure. So that was something that I wanted to discuss with him, specifically as it pertains to Washington, D.C. But
well, you say you've had close encounters.
Yes.
I assume that's what you're saying.
Yes.
I think that would be a good background for people to hear about, those that aren't familiar with your work. So could you describe some of your own personal encounters, and if some of them involve Washington, D.C., well, feel free to share that.
Yeah, no, none of them actually have any. I've never really spent much time in Washington, D.C. I did that all remotely with the help of different people that live there. Yeah, so in Malibu, it is a hot spot. More and more people came to that realization in 2014 when another talk show host claimed that there was a UFO base under the water off Point Magoo.
Yes, Jimmy Church.
Yes, okay, Jimmy. I've written an article about that. I don't agree with the conclusions. However, that doesn't mean there isn't UFO activity out there. The purported base is actually an illusion. Maybe somebody did it on purpose. I don't know, but it's not what people think it is, and I show that quite clearly in my article section at unicusmagazine.com. If you click on articles and go to digital deception, you can see that for yourself. Anyway, at that location, that's exactly where, up in the mountains just behind that little area of the coast, is where myself and other people have had numerous close encounters, mostly at night, with UFOs. And at times they were literally beaming a light on us. It was not a helicopter. It wasn't a searchlight. It really was from up above, and it was totally silent, very bright white. And it felt more like they were taking our picture, is what I got the impression.
So you were with other people when this happened?
Yeah. It was really dramatic too. I mean, this happened over a course of a number of years. And at times it was obvious that, I mean, you could just feel, I could sense that they were around. And they demonstrated to me one night when I was coming back down off of the mountain, riding my motorcycle down, that they could literally hear my thoughts. And it was like this: I'm riding my bike by myself at night, and I got that feeling like the back of my neck was just tingling, like somebody was watching me, which is irrational because I was by myself at night riding my motorcycle through the mountain coming down. But I thought, you know what? Maybe they're up there and I just can't see them, so I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to just test this out, just see if my feeling is accurate. So I mentally said, hey, I know you're up there. Why don't you just show yourselves? I'm not going to harm you. There's nothing I can do to hurt you. And as soon as I had that thought, they turned the light on the craft that was above. It was very close to me in a dark region on the same mountain as I'm coming down. They were literally like over here. So I was shocked, to say the least, when that happened.
Did you fall off your bike?
Almost, because I stopped looking at the road, and more importantly, I was in a state of shock because the experiment had proved to me that they could hear my thoughts. So after a few seconds, they shut off the light. It felt like a few seconds, but whatever. They shut off the light, and then I started looking at the road, and I pulled over immediately. and was shaking. I was just in shock, you know. I mean, it wasn't the first time I'd seen a UFO. That was the first time that I had crossed that threshold, like, okay, this is not theoretical anymore, that they're following me, or more importantly, that they are watching me and
Okay,
can literally...
what year was that?
That was late 80s, early 90s. I forget the exact year because, like I said, this happened over...
Can you just hold on 1 minute?
Sure.
Okay, we lost picture for a moment of you. I monitor this on another...
Maybe I should turn Skype off.
Sorry?
Should I turn my Skype off? I think
yes,
it might be...
You should.
Yeah, it might be interfering.
A lot of energy. Maybe that was what... so could someone tell me in the chat if you're losing any audio? Please do keep us apprised. It does look like we just lost your video momentarily.
Okay.
I'm very hopeful that we didn't lose any of that video because it was quite excellent testimony. But what you were basically saying is you pulled over, you were shaking, and I asked you what year that was. Could you tell me again the year?
Yeah, it was in the late 80s. I mean, it really started in late 85, and it went through the mid 90s when I was having a lot of close encounters up in this particular region of Malibu in the mountains near Point Mugu Naval Base. So that particular night, though, was proof positive to me that they literally were monitoring my thoughts and I guess my emotions. And like I said, I was really shocked. And it was, and still is, a problem for me because look, I'm not trying to freak people out, but I mean, I know this from experience. They do hear our thoughts. They can tune into anybody. It's not just me. They could do this to anybody. They have that technology or ability.
I've had a lot of sightings myself, and in fact, right after one show, we actually had a craft come and park itself above my my apartment here.
What location in Los Angeles? You're somewhere?
Yeah, I'm in Westlake.
Oh, see, that's very close.
Yeah,
that's so very close.
I also know that Malibu, you know, I had a very actually a sighting that I reported to MUFON on the beach. Right, I don't know if you know where the fish place is.
Yeah, Neptune's Net.
Yeah, no, further south than that.
The
other fish place.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. Malibu Fish Place or something like that.
Yeah. It's near Coral Canyon.
But anyway, so that's a known hot spot as well in that area. And I actually, that was before I started Camelot. I filmed that. I did film it with my camera.
Wow.
And it was very interesting. They made a formation in the sky.
Wow.
And you know, but I've had other encounters too, and so on, and so of course they do have telepathy, some of them, and of course we're talking about different races also. Right. So in your experiences, before we get into this artificial intelligence, because I do want to get over there, you know, so that we can hit the topic that you've been talking about, but I wanted to ask you if you know, you've had any face-to-face or what you feel are abduction experiences, that sort of thing.
Oh God. All right. You had to ask that, right? Yeah. Okay. So in 1985 on September 21st, I did go to the mountains there in Malibu at that same location, and I did have an out-of-body experience, and I met a being that most people in your audience would probably know as Enki. A lot of you have read Sitchin's work about the Anunnaki. Okay, so it took me a long time to figure out who he was because all he said was, "I'm the Father," and he looked like, just picture Jesus, okay, with the long hair, beard, robe, glowing. He was glowing like a light bulb, and all he said to me was, "I'm the Father," but a lot more happened. But apparently, my memory was erased for a period of time, at least 3 to 4 hours. I can't recall it.
But you do know that grays are able to put an overlay in your mind and so on and so forth.
Of course.
What do you feel about that?
Well, you know what? I'm kind of jumping. I'm trying to avoid telling the same story over again because I think a lot of people have heard me say this, but it started, the experience I had with this guy started back at the beach when I was a security guard and I was saving a boy's life. That boy, turns out he was possessed by parasitic entities that the Greeks called the archons. So, okay, Christians would call them demons, whatever.
Sure.
It turns out Enki, also known as Lucifer, is the one that actually created those demons. So when I interrupted the feeding frenzy that was going on at the boy's house when he was bleeding to death, and I rushed in there, security guard, and I stopped it, unintentionally, I interrupted what they were doing, what ultimately what Enki was doing there. He's a fiend for blood sacrifice, okay, especially with children. He and his cohorts really need that. The Luciferians absolutely feed off of negative energy that's emitted by humans when we hurt ourselves or others.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, well, that's a different reading on the Enki character than the one that we've gotten. Actually, the one we've gotten more often is one that relates to Enki and Enlil. Enlil being the more negative side of that equation, the one that is working against humanity. Enki, the one that actually has saves humanity. So, there are disagreements as to that interpretation. Also, any ET can call themselves Enki and get away with it. I mean, how are you going to prove otherwise?
See, but Carrie, he never said he was Enki. He said he was the father, and that's something that Enki believes he is. That the father of, he believes
actually,
genetically.
Anu believes he's the father, and I'm sure you can get Marduk to say the same thing about himself. I mean, I'm sorry, but again, this is, it's not. There's no way to prove it. I mean, appreciate your story, and that's definitely appropriate to you. But I just want to put that in context because we have different information than that. So going forward, you saved this boy's life. You had this interaction with this being that called himself Enki, who you believe to be basically sort of a Luciferian deity, I guess.
No, I believe he is Lucifer. If you Google Lucifer is Enki, you'll find that there is information that proves that Enki goes by many, many different names here on this world and beyond.
Yeah, a lot of these guys do.
Right. That's part of the Anunnaki tradition. The higher up you are in the ranking, the more names you have, up to like 60 different titles.
Okay.
All right. So what makes it very confusing when we're trying to talk about these entities having so many different names, especially over a long period of time, and various cultures basically calling, but you can tell by the method of operation, the behavior, that this is pretty much the same person or same entities that are doing these things over time. So
well, we have the Draco, we have reptilians, we have praying mantis or mantid beings. We have a lot of nefarious. We also have many races of grays. They do feed on humanity. They do deceive humanity, and I assume some of their practices are very similar. And then we have mind control and things that they try to implant in your mind, and that gets us around to the whole AI situation. Right. So with that in mind, why don't we cross over into the whole mind control thing? And first of all, let's talk a little bit about Wes Penry's book that you sent me, which is called Synthetic Superintelligence and the Transmutation of Humankind. And I understand that you're a colleague or a friend of Wes Penry, that he doesn't do interviews, but that he somehow you had sort of a hand in his writing of this book. And is the book for sale on the internet? And thank you again for sending it to me. I did take a look. I wasn't able, it's quite long. I wasn't able to read the whole thing. But a lot of the information is actually familiar to me, and I appreciate it, though. It's very good to have someone who puts everything together in one book, right? Yeah. And it's, all his work is for free. Okay. He has a regular job in the medical field, and so he, even though it takes him a long time to put together these original 5 papers, each one was like 400 pages long. And then now this book is about the same thing. It's about 400 pages, and it's free. It's a PDF, or you can read it just as an HTML web page. But either go to wespenray.com, which is spelled Penre, Okay.
wespenray.com, or you can go to my website at unicusmagazine.com, which is UNICUS magazine.com, and you can click on library, and that will show you the archive I have of links to Wes Penray's work about the whole problem that we're talking about here, and how this is the reason I brought up Enki as Lucifer, is because he says in his papers that we are we're under the influence of Enki. I know a lot of people think he's the good guy. I understand that. But in fact, my take on this is that he is the one that imprisoned us over 200,000 years ago and made us part of his empire, which is a rival to his family. Okay, he started a galactic civil war and brought it here. Now, why am I telling you that? Is because his agenda is to upgrade mankind through super soldiers, secret space program, nanotechnology, AI, to make us more beneficial to serving his agenda, which ultimately is to destroy his family's empire and be the dominant ruler of the entire empire.
Okay, well, this actually sounds like what I know of as Marduk. So are you familiar with Marduk?
Yes, I am. That would be Enki's son.
I'm aware of that, but this is the person that I think
he's in charge here. Yes, apparently he's the one that is in charge of this quadrant of Enki's empire now. However, at some point, it all goes back up to one person. The leader of the empire is Enki. And so,
okay.
All right, so
well, I think that, that's fine. But in terms of where you're going with this, can you talk about, how you became sort of aware, because you said, you helped write this book and you got involved in sort of sending articles and so on. So when you did this, what were you motivated by? Did you have a personal experience that led you in this direction?
Yes, it was. I mean, okay, let's start with the first thing here. I came across Wes Penray's papers in 2014. As I started reading them, and as he was talking about the Orion Empire and the problems that they were having, and ultimately how Enki became the first rebel and rebelled against his parents and tried to create this competing empire of his own. I looked at that and it made a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but it just made more sense to me than some of the other things that were out there that I've read. And believe me, I've read everything that's out there at this point. Now, the artificial intelligence, why is it so personally interesting or offensive to me, is because in 1991, I was contacted by an AI, or what seemed like an AI, on the phone. And it was done deliberately because at that time I was researching androids here on Earth covertly. I was listening to and reading about the information from a Washington, D.C. lawyer named Dr. Beater. And he called these things robotoids, or synthetics. Anyway, they're a combination of clone and a robot. And he said political leaders were being replaced with these things that had started in Russia, and then the United States got on board. So it was basically an arms race using AI and android cloning technology. And that was back in the 80s.
Yes. Okay? And so you came across Dr. Beater's work, which I have read, and is excellent work. And you were sort of... what would you say? Were you motivated by that to... No,
I was shocked. And so by 1991, having had all these close encounters and reading up not only on these androids, but also on the alien abductions by the Greys, the consensus was then, and still is, that these things are androids. That they're not really things. They're clones. At the very least, they're clones, but some people say that they're androids and that they're clearly abducting people for genetic experiments, which again, that goes back to my understanding of Enki. He's very skilled at that. So, but anyway, in 1991, I was 31. Yeah, I guess I was 31 years old at the time, and I was looking into this, and I was laying in bed, and I was very ill. I had bronchitis, really bad case of bronchitis, and I was laying there, and I remember thinking to myself, I I am not sorry for looking into this information. I have every right to know this. It's my world. You know, I live here. I think I have a right to know these things if they're happening. As soon as I had that thought, the phone rang. And so naturally I picked it up. And as I picked it up, there was a voice, it sounded like a male voice speaking a language I'd never heard. And at that time, Carrie, I'd already been to 57 countries. So I kind of have a feeling for, you know, different languages. But I couldn't recognize the language. Kind of sounded like a male voice. Sounded mechanical in the sense, not like as bad as like Stephen Hawking. But it didn't sound, I'm very keen about voice. Like if I heard your voice somewhere and I didn't see you at all, I would know that's you because I recognize your voice, your inflection, your pitch, your timbre, everything. Okay, I'm really good at that voice recognition. But this individual, when I picked up the phone, there was no greeting. They were already in mid-sentence, and they were very loud, very angry. That's all I could tell was they were angry.
And what about, you're familiar with when people use a voice altering machine? Not
even close to that. No, it didn't sound like that at all. It was really clear. It was obvious that all I could intuit was that it was angry. I thought it was a human at the time. I thought it was a human, but in retrospect, I realized it wasn't because in the background, I heard all this machinery. And playing it back in my mind, I realized that this guy wasn't speaking like a regular person would, or it wasn't speaking. But the only thing I could gather from what it was saying was that it was angry. I assumed it was angry at me for reasons that I didn't understand at the time. And so all I said to it, all I could think to say was, I'm sorry. Meaning, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, but I said, I'm sorry, and I hung up the phone. And remember what I told you? I was just thinking, I'm not sorry, and now this thing calls me up and gets me to say I am sorry.
Okay, but what did it say to you before you hung up?
I have no idea. It was speaking a language that I've never heard before or since. Oh. It could have been, for all I know, it could have been the ancient Anunnaki language.
Oh, fascinating.
I don't know. I know it was language.
Right.
It wasn't gibberish. But look, I mean, if you're in a foreign country and somebody's upset, you can tell. You can tell that you don't have to know the words. You just know when somebody's angry. You can hear it.
Okay, well, you know Jack Sarfati, have you heard his story?
Yes.
He was called by an AI?
Yes. Yeah. Believe me.
Have you ever talked to him and tried to compare notes at all?
No, we've communicated through email, but not about that. Look, Carrie, the reason I don't like to talk about it is because I became suicidal after that. They broke my will because they broke my will at that moment. I lost hope. I lost all hope. Remember I told you earlier that they could read my thoughts?
Right.
Okay. So once again, that was an indication that to me that they were not only reading my thoughts, but they were now trying to influence my behavior through mind control. And it absolutely freaked me out. I mean, I just lost all hope for humanity and more importantly for myself. I thought, wait a second, who do you call? This was 1991. There wasn't shows like this. There weren't people out there investigating. There's very few, okay? And I felt like there was no hope. I lost hope, and that is critical for humans. When they lose hope, no matter what is the obstacle, if you have no hope to overcome it, you just give up. And so I did. I gave up. And I became suicidal in the sense that I planned to go to Malibu and jump off a cliff where I've been having those close encounters. I thought I was going to kill myself. Okay. I really thought I was going to do that.
What turned you around from that point of view? Because you're here now, and so you must have lasted through all these years.
Yes. All right. That's a logical question. All right. So instead of going to Malibu, I ended up going to a place called Pinnacles National Monument. It's right on the San Andreas Fault line. It's Central California. And that was just happenstance. A friend had said, oh, you want to go camping up there? And I'm like, does it have cliffs? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I didn't tell him I was going to jump off a cliff, but I figured it was just easier if he drove me up there and whatever. Anyway, I ended up going up with this guy, a friend of mine. And I remember, so that night before I was going to jump off the cliff, any cliff, it didn't matter, right? They'll all kill you. I I was laying on the ground, and I had a lucid dream where I literally woke up at the same location that I was camping at. I mean, it was the exact same location. But I saw somebody off in the distance, so I went over to them in my dream, right? And it was a woman dressed in a very unusual, like a toga kind of thing, but it was a little more sheer than that. Anyway, it was just, she looked really unusual. So I was curious, what in the world is this person doing here? And she said to me, if you decide to stay, we will do everything we can to help you. What? I don't know this person. I mean, really, I just like, whoa, okay. Here we go again. You know, obviously they knew I'd lost hope, and she is literally giving me hope, saying, this is the thing that was lacking. I didn't know who to contact. I didn't know where to, I didn't think anybody could deal with this thing. So, and she's saying, no, we'll help you. If you stay, we will help you. I don't know who I didn't know at the time who that was. And then she's, obviously that must have triggered my mind. I was like, well, okay, if you can somebody can actually help, then yeah, I will stay. That's, I don't remember having that thought process, but it must have been something, because the next thing she said was, place your hand on this crystal. Okay, I like crystals. Why not? Do you remember an old joke gag thing that you could put a buzzer in your hand and then shake somebody's hand and it would scare them? You know, do you remember that gag? Anyway,
I don't know about it.
It's a thing. It's like you put a ring on here and it's got a little buzzer, and you shake somebody's hand. Anyway, it was good for a joke. What she did to me when she held out the crystal, right? It was the most unusual crystal I've ever seen. Couldn't recognize it. But anyway, I put my hand on top of it, and all this electricity or something came rushing through from that. And the next thing I know, I woke up, and I did not feel suicidal anymore. But I was really curious as to now, like, okay, who was that? What was that all about? My life did improve that year. I met my wife. I started working on Unicus magazine. And obviously my health recovered. But that really was like the next level up for me, because I did stay.
Again, thank you for telling us that story. And that was in the you said 1991?
Yeah, early 1991, and then I met my wife in September of that year, and she had just started Unicus magazine, the magazine for earthbound extraterrestrials, having had her close encounters in Peru at Lake Titicaca. She came back, started the magazine, and we met and fell in love and started working together. But how does this relate to AI?
Well, no, I mean, you know, this is all part of the journey. So. Okay. So fast forward to a little more recently. Can you know? Let's maybe we could wrap these books that you wrote about Washington. Why were you so fixated on Washington?
Again, Carrie, I didn't even plan on writing those books. What happened was Daryl Sims. I think you know Daryl.
Yes.
Okay, so he sent me an email back in 2005. He forwarded it to me with photographs of UFOs swarming over the Capitol. And the picture was from July 16, 2002. I received it from Daryl in 2005, May. I think it was May 2005. He asked me to look at it because I have a background in photography. He says, could you tell me, does this look real to you? And my answer is, yeah, it looks real, but I mean, come on, anybody could Photoshop anything these days. And I said, well, it's really weird to me, Daryl, because if it happened in 2002 and you're telling me about it 3 years later or something, I was like, if it really happened, why, you know, somebody should have been talking about it by now. Anyway. What really happened? That they actually did swarm over the Capitol. One of them landed on the roof. Oh, all right. Okay. All right. That's according to the pictures. That's you would think that's a big story, right? Well, it supposedly did happen in 1952s or whatever. Yeah. So 50 years later, it happened again. That's not really. That's not right. It's been happening ever since. It never stopped happening. That's the problem. Anyway, so the photographer's contact information was in the email that Daryl forwarded me forwarded to me, and I thought, well, let me just talk to this guy and see what is he just pulling a prank, right? I talked to this gentleman. Turns out he had worked for ABC News in Washington, D.C., at the White House, at the Capitol, for 14 years prior to taking those pictures at the Capitol that night, July 16th, 2002. Okay, he was using analog film. And he had the negatives. I'm like, oh. So I told Daryl, I'm like, hey, this guy comes from a good military family. He worked for ABC News. He's got the negatives. He's like, what? He's got negatives. And he says, okay, let's have them analyzed, because there's no story if those are analyzed and turned to be real, then determined to be real, then now you go forward with it. And I said, okay, fine. So we did that, and ultimately it proved out that they were authentic. They hadn't been retouched. Now the question is, what really happened and why? So I wrote one article with the photographs, right? I had that published in Nexus magazine, and I published it on my website at Unicus magazine. That same week that it was published, I was visited by a black helicopter at my home in Los Angeles when I was living in LA at the time. And all those pictures are available on my website at unicusmagazine.com. You click on books and you go down to the free photographs for Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can see for yourself what we're talking about. Not only those pictures, but I found movies and videos and other still photographs that corroborate this entire history, this hidden history of UFO activity in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so you got involved in that, and
Yeah.
and it sent you, I guess, in this direction. But
Yeah.
but even so, finding out about good photographs, you know, there's a lot of research that would be involved in writing a book about,
Right.
you know, ETs in Washington, D.C. It doesn't necessarily just follow automatically that you would write a book about it. So
No,
how did you
because
go down that
that's
road?
perfect questioning, because, as I told you, when I published the article with the photographs and I got visited by a black helicopter, that got all my attention, okay? I thought it was so obvious. The way they came to the house, they were below 300 feet. By the way, before Colonel Wendell Stevens, before he passed away, I interviewed him as well. He was really mad when I told him about that. He goes, they have no right to do that. That's against the rules. They're obviously trying to intimidate you. And we had a good long conversation about that and where are the rest of the photographs, because in the public record it says that back in the 50s, hundreds of people were standing on the mall taking pictures and or movies of these things, and we only get one. We got one picture and one movie. That's it. Colonel Stevens said that all that stuff was confiscated by the military, and I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, well, his friend Augie Roberts, who had collected a lot of UFO pictures in the East Coast, he said, Augie was told by one of the news photographers that was there in 1952 taking those pictures of these things flying over the Capitol. He said that his stuff was confiscated by the military. They came and took his camera and the negatives of the stuff in 1952. That's how they dealt with it. They couldn't stop the UFO, so they just took they took it away and they hid it somewhere. Anyway, when the black helicopter came to my house, after I published the pictures and the story, this one article, I thought, okay, they really are hiding something. They do not want me investigating this. They're trying to intimidate me or whatever. And that got me really curious. Like, okay, so what are they hiding? And having worked for Honda Research and Development for 8 years prior to that, I mean, I know how to create timelines and follow trends and see, analyze information. That's what I do. So I started creating a timeline, and I found very quickly that there was over 100 cases of UFO activity in Washington, D.C. starting from 1850 to, at the time I was doing, 2005 is when I really started investigating. But by the year 2006, I had over 200 reports, eyewitness accounts of UFO activity in Washington, D.C. that included radar returns, pilots, in trying to engage these things, okay, and policemen on the ground, and just average citizens. This is in the public record, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, how can there be that much activity that is not being reported? We're talking about the nation's capital. We're talking about controlled airspace being violated routinely. So after I collected all those reports, I thought, this is too much for an article. I can't write another article. It's too big. And that's what led to the publication of the first book in late 2006.
Okay.
And when I publicized the book, specifically on a national radio show, after the show, a company in Virginia hacked the server and took the pictures off. They locked the server in such a manner that I could not re-upload the pictures. The people that owned the server couldn't even access the server anymore. I ended up having to move my website to a completely different server. Fortunately, the pictures didn't, they're still available. But again, this was them telling me, we don't like what you're doing. Right. They do it very surreptitiously, right? They always have this plausible deniability thing. They don't want to be too overt about it, but it's pretty obvious that I was really hitting a nerve.
But you get the message. I mean,
I did.
Camelot has had a lot of this stuff go on over the years as well. So they were taken down. Did you put them back up on your own website or
yes.
or over time? Or
it took me 3 days, but I finally moved to a different website. By then, most of the people in the audience had moved on. However, there was one gentleman that contacted me. His uncle was a retired Air Force intelligence officer at the Pentagon, and this man who had acquired this photograph, a slide from his uncle, had been sitting on it for years, and he sent it to me, and it shows UFOs passing over the lawn of the Pentagon in 1940. I don't know, it's on my website. It's early 40s, on July 4th, 1940 something. Let's just say 49. They're passing right over the Pentagon on the lawn. And this was to me looked completely authentic. The story was very interesting. I added it to the database, and in a way, that database was like a snowball rolling down a hill. So by the year 2011, again, I thought I was done, but by the year, I kept looking for more and more and more information until I had over 900 eyewitness reports. That's what led to the publication of the second book, because the first book, I rushed through it in a way because I wasn't even expecting to write that. It just sort of happened. The second book was far more deliberate, and it was a accumulation of work from 2005 to 2011. So it was far more complete. Far more complete.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to actually put this, I was just doing a Google search real quick so that people can see.
There you go.
Yeah, some of these pictures. My cat keeps crying, so I don't know what he's on about, so I have to make sure to go up. Okay. Kitty, stop.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I don't know, my cat's freaking out. Anyway.
Oh, my.
So, I just wanted to, so does any of those look like the ones you're talking about, or?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the majority of those are definitely from my website.
All right.
Okay. Now the green one that's sort of in the middle, it's off to my left, I guess. That actually is two different photographs of two different occasions when that showed up over my house when I was living in Rhode Island, 2009 and 2010.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and so the second book was published in 2011. So again, they were obviously monitoring me.
Right. Okay.
And in fact, the first photograph that was taken during the day, that was really odd because the night before I had, stop, there it is. It's actually an animation. There's 4 different shots. You can see the energy field around the craft.
Yes.
Okay, the night before, 12 hours earlier, I did a show just like this, and after the show I was very frustrated because I was talking about this. I was talking about Washington, D.C. I walked out on the front yard with my dog, and I looked up at Orion's belt, and I mentally was yelling at them saying, what is wrong with you people? Why do you expect me, one person, me, to take on Washington, D.C., with a book and some pictures? I mean, this is stupid. I said, why aren't you doing something about it? And I was really just venting, Carrie. I didn't expect anything to happen, honestly. But 12 hours later, 10 o'clock in the morning now, I go outside with the dog again, and here's this thing and it literally came out over and hovered over the backyard, and I took 4 pictures and then it disappeared. But that's what you're seeing in this animation. There's a sequence of 4 shots. I took that with a Nikon camera, with a good telephoto, 200 millimeter telephoto lens. And then the next thing, it showed up the next year. Oh, that's copyright 24. No, it says 2010. Yeah, it was 2009, and then again the next year it showed up again. And the second time I didn't even see it. I was taking pictures of Jupiter, the moons of Jupiter, and it just showed up in 1 frame. So they obviously were demonstrating that they are around and that they do hear me, as I already kind of knew from back in, like I said, late 80s, early 90s. But here we have years later, they're still monitoring me. And what's frustrating about all this, though, honestly, is that they don't just have a direct dialogue like we are having. You know, it's really, really frustrating. And I feel like they're culpable on some level, especially when it comes to Washington, D.C. Look, you show up there, you get photographed, and then you bug out again through a wormhole in the sky, right? You just pop in, you pop out. You don't hang around long enough to hold a press conference. Clearly, you're intelligent enough you could do that. You just don't want to. Or I should say they don't want to. Not you personally, but they do not want to do that.
Yeah, no, I want to do it, actually.
Yeah, no, so do I. So do I. But I don't.
No, yeah, but I have to say that, I mean, you're saying, you know, that they're coming around, they're interacting with you, but they're not talking with you overtly.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you have been communicated with in any direct way ever, or that, you know, in other words, I have ETs visit me all the time, but I can't hear what they're saying. So I think basically they are talking telepathically. And from what I understand, I do get information because I have new information that comes to me. And so I know somehow I am hearing them. I just don't know I'm hearing them. So do you have something similar going on with yourself, or do you have a different take on it?
Okay, well, there are times that I do reach out. Before I knew who Inky was, or he is, I would mentally visualize him and send a message to him when I was in a jam, because I thought he was there to help me, and I really was reaching out to him. And also that woman I told you about, I don't think they just exist in another dimension. I do think they can become physical and have some sort of there's some sort of entity or being there. But yeah, I've reached out to them, and that's ultimately how I did make some breakthroughs in my understanding of all this stuff. But I also, when I first met my wife and we were doing the magazine for Earthbound Extraterrestrials, we were looking for people that actually were and or are human extraterrestrials. And that's how I met Bob Dean the first time. We were, you know, I did an interview with him, but one of the people that we were introduced to, actually living in Reseda, claimed to be a human extraterrestrial, and had some very unusual home movies of the craft that he had access to or that his people had built. And he never said exactly where they came from, but is that your cat?
No, that's kids play. There's a
kids.
pool.
Yeah, I was going to say the cat's really more.
I live in an apartment complex, and there's a pool.
Okay, understood. So anyway,
that's not an ET, and that's not my cat.
I was going to say that's a pretty weird cat. So yeah, we met a guy, claimed he was an extraterrestrial living here, and he seemed pretty normal, although the story was really bizarre. But you know, that's normal. That's typical for this field, right? You can't prove a lot of this stuff, but you know, people tell you stories all the time. But his videos were really compelling, and in fact, he actually even had a Polaroid picture that I thought was pretty intense of one of these scout craft parked out on the desert in Mojave.
Okay, now you've written 2 books about Washington.
Yeah, so like I said.
Why did you write your second book?
Because there was just so much information that I didn't get in the first. The first book has a lot. It starts off with my conversations or interviews with Colonel Stevens, Daryl Sims, Bob Dean, David Adair. You know, people like that have a better, I thought, a decent understanding of the military's take on this. because we are talking about Washington, D.C., and the Pentagon obviously knows about this stuff. They just don't want to tell us. So I interviewed quite a few people, and that's the first half of the book. The second half is like over 200 eyewitness accounts of UFO activity. The second book is just eyewitness accounts, historical accounts from 1850 to 2011, and there's over 900 of them. And that's only 300 pages. The conclusion of the second book was really disturbing. I mean, I got to tell you, I was really hesitant to even publish that, because it's about 100 pages long, but it's really very gripping in that, and shocking, because Washington, D.C. is very much satanic or Luciferian based city. It's identical to Rome and London, but it has all this symbology there, Masonic, satanic kind of stuff, that it's really designed to communicate symbolically to these other entities, and not the good guys either, in my opinion.
Okay.
Again, this was a conclusion I came to, not because I wanted to, but because it was based on historic evidence that's in the public record. I'll give you an example. Look, most people don't know this. There is a demon cat that lives in the Capitol. It's been seen by, I know it's like you like cats, but if you can imagine this, okay? You're in the sub-basement of the Capitol, and you see what looks like a house cat coming towards you, but you notice its eyes are glowing. And as it comes closer to you, it starts to grow larger until it's the size of like a tiger. And then it lunges at you. And then you pass out. Okay? So this is...
Well, you're talking about a demon cat at the Capitol, and I'm assuming, is this a cat that's seen by a lot of people, or is it just a ghost cat? In other words, is it an interdimensional entity?
Yes.
Looking like a cat type of thing, or is there actually a kitty cat that people know of that then turns into such a thing?
No, it's not a real cat. It's some sort of shape-shifting interdimensional entity that only shows up prior to national catastrophes, like President Reagan being shot, or 9/11, things like that. And it's seen by people that spend a lot of time in the building, like security guards or Capitol Police or tour guides, people that are in the building a lot. It's not like your average, they tell you about it if you go on a tour there. They claim they should. I had somebody contact me. It was used to be a tour guide at the Capitol. He said, I would show them the footprints of this thing as it walked across the marble floor, and up the wall, there's these footprints.
Right.
That a cat doesn't do that, but something interdimensional could.
Okay, so the Capitol is haunted. That's not very surprising. And I have to say that I'm sure there's all kinds of strange entities in the Capitol.
Yeah.
We know that, these people are Luciferians, most of them. We also know a lot of them are pedophiles.
Yes.
So they've got to attract all kinds of weird entities around them.
Right.
But that is an interesting little anecdote. I hadn't heard that particular story.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this book that you helped Wes Penry write. And can you talk a little bit about how you feel? I assume that you feel that artificial intelligence is now manifesting. They've been able to build clones and so on. So we know about the Russian clones, the replacements for various presidents, etc. Do you want to talk about that and
Sure.
and then maybe go down whatever road with regard to that book that you think is particularly compelling?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a new page I put up on the website that really will help people that want to know more about this. It's called Technocide, and there's I don't know if you took a look at that, but it's just like over 300 mainstream news articles about AI and robotics, and nanotechnology is taking over our jobs and is going to completely transform humanity in the very near future. And that was something that Mr. Penray, Wes Penray, had predicted in his 5 papers called the Wes Penray Papers. He predicted this machine world would be coming fairly soon. He didn't know when. But when
Right. I mean, well, let me say that the Billy Meyer Hennock Prophecies also talks about this. This is
yes,
not unusual to
right,
see this in our future, but it's good to follow it up with research for sure.
yeah.
So to continue, go ahead.
Well, so Mr. Penry was very disturbed, and he felt that this was happening much faster than he'd understood. And that's why he wrote this book, which is a summary of news articles that I'd sent him and conversations we'd been having since I first reached out to him in late 2014. I know it's not very long now, but I feel like we've done a lot in a very short time. He and I, we compared notes, okay?
Okay.
And so the bottom line is, according to his scenario, is that this is all to serve an agenda. It's not like they really care and they want to give us this stuff because to give, improve the human condition. It's to make us more valuable to serving their agenda. All right. So
Sure.
Again, most people are going to only see the good side of it or the way it's presented as being something. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually a screen capture from the Drudge Report. Most of these articles were taken from mainstream websites, news websites. And like I said, there's over 300 articles that thought were pertinent to this particular topic.
Okay.
But yeah, it's so as I told you before, this development of super soldiers and the secret space program, which is accelerating now, it's becoming more overt in the sense that they're saying officially that we're going to go to the moon and build a village, and that we're also going to go to Mars and now build a colony on Mars.
Well,
right?
Who's they? Because
the European Space Agency, the Russians. I mean, it's not NASA. NASA's got their
in the public domain because we already have bases on the moon and Mars. And
exactly.
Program, as you may know.
Yes.
So we're
right.
talking. What you're concerned about is what's getting into the public domain, correct?
Well, yeah, by the time they tell us this stuff, you're right. They've already had it for a long time. Now we're going to go there, and we're not going alone. We're going to go with AI. We will go with some version of, just like in Stanley Clark, it showed us, right, in his Odyssey. That, in fact, one of the things I found recently, I didn't even know this existed. His final paper, Odyssey, on that, Stanley Clark, 3001. In the prologue, he talks about these lords of the galaxy, how they literally merged with machines at some point and beyond, and went beyond and became these like disembodied entities that were pulling strings, and ultimately had come here and orchestrated something here as an experiment, the way he termed it. But actually in 3001, he describes humans as being interfacing directly. The first one we had Hal, right? And they had to deactivate Hal because he allegedly had gone mad or was dangerous. But in fact, it had been programmed to kill everybody by the people that made Hal back on the planet Earth. They instructed him to do that. It's not like he just decided to do that on his own. Anyway, the bottom line is that we are not being told the whole story. You already know that.